This topic today, I'm so excited about. It's been a long time coming because it's based on my favorite movie, personally, and I'm going to have to probably say of all time, Star Trek: The Undiscovered Country. And we're going to be getting into it today because we have an amazing guest. Just start out, of course, I'm Michael Dismuke, freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures RPG, blogger on Continuing Missions, and also lead writer on Captain's Log, which is the solo RPG for Star Trek Adventures. And this show, Continuing Conversations, is not a show unless we have along with us for the ride, Jim Johnson.
Hey everybody, Jim Johnson. I'm the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG and the Captain's Log solo RPG, both published by Modiphius Entertainment. I've been a co-host on this show with Michael for 2 years now, going strong. Looking forward to all the additional episodes we've got coming up. But tonight, we've got Michael Duxbury back with us to talk about this awesome topic. So, Michael, for those who don't know you, why don't you quickly introduce yourself, and then we'll just jump into the topic.
For sure. I'm Michael Duxbury. I'm a freelance RPG writer and self-publisher. I'm also the organizer of the UK Tabletop Industry Network. If you recognize me from being on any of the previous shows, it's probably because you're familiar with some of the other stuff that I've written for Star Trek Adventures, whether that's the Klingon War tactical campaign, it came out quite recently, a series of mission briefs on Starfleet Academy, or way back when, a short adventure I did for Modiphian magazine called The Ghostwriter. And I'm thrilled to be back. I'm thrilled to be talking Undiscovered Country. I love that movie.
Right? And we're taking it from, of course, the angle of the Klingons today, because both myself and Michael Duxbury were asked to write by Jim a Klingon angle on the Undiscovered Country. So what we're going to do is we're going to first talk about Duxbury's mission module that he put together, kind of the premise of it. We'll talk about an overlay of the mission briefs that I wrote. And then we're going to do one of the things we love doing the most is riffing and some world building in case you decide you want to play a Klingon campaign circa movie era, which is one of my favorite eras ever in Star Trek, right? Jim, what do you think? What any ideas about anything else you want to add to the conversation?
No, I think that sounds like a great topic for the episode. And I think just a little context. I remember it must have been 2 years or maybe 18 months ago. I don't remember how it came up in conversation, whether it was a continuing conversation or if it was something on one of the social media groups. I remember somebody complained that there wasn't enough movie era stuff in production and with standalone adventures or mission briefs or whatever. And that was right about the time we were finalizing the development on Utopia Planitia. And of course, in Utopia Planitia, I knew that we were developing a new look and feel, right, for the layout, so that we could bring in that great movie era aesthetic, right, with the ship readouts and schematics and stuff. And I think I said, okay, well, that's because I just haven't gotten a lot of pitches from people for movie era stuff. And I think immediately that opened up the floodgates, and I got like 8 or 9 pitches in quick succession from a bunch of people, including you two, saying, "Oh, well, I could do a movie era," and so I commissioned a couple of them, and just by virtue of the developmental process, Dismuke, I think yours came out earlier, and then Michael, we finally released yours just recently as well, and it just worked out that they were themed on the same thing. Of course, Khitomer Accords is a big important event that happened in the franchise, and of course there's tons of stories you can spin off of it, and I was just excited to see that it all work out. So yeah. I mean, that's the context, such as it is, but yeah.
And let's talk about this real quick before we jump into the specifics of our modules and how to fit them in. Let's talk about the political context of what was happening when those Khitomer Accords were being signed, and afterwards. For those of you who have not seen the movie, I hope go watch it. Please go watch all the movies. We know that for decades, Gene Roddenberry, the concept of Klingons was much based off the Cold War, them representing Russians, representing the Chinese, that Eastern Eastern Bloc of nations there. And it came to a head, of course, in the Undiscovered Country movie, where now Kirk's crew, Kirk, of course, having a lot of antagonism because of the death of his son and having warred with the Klingons for decades and decades, is now on the lead diplomatic trip to meet Chancellor Gorkon, the High Chancellor of the Klingon Empire, so that finally, after the destruction of their main dilithium mines, peace can be had, Klingons and Federation can shake hands. And so there's a lot of antagonism there. And we see it from Kirk's perspective. We see it from the Federation perspective. But I've always wondered is how the heck did it go down on the Klingon side? All the houses could not have agreed that the Khitomer Accords were correct, much like the Eastern Bloc nations did not agree. And to this day, we see are still rivaling about going back to Soviet era policies oftentimes. And so that's always boggled my mind. What does that look like? And I compare it to Dune almost like the houses competing for power, competing for Arrakis on Dune. I always thought that's what must be happening in the Klingon Empire, which of course we've only seen like 1% of, if even that, in Star Trek. We don't know what's going on with their alien worlds and their alien cultures. So that's the fascination, I think, with the subject of Khitomer Accords from a Klingon perspective. What about you, Michael?
So, yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that's all such interesting stuff, and in a way has such resonance with things we've been talking about recently for the Klingon War tactical campaign, where you've got a similar situation of the Klingon houses being so fractious that even, there's this war going on, they're all fighting together, and in the aftermath of that threatens to kind of dismantle that unity. I wrote the final scenario of the Klingon War campaign, The Dying of the Light, which is about the exact moment that the war ends, and suddenly the Klingons have to work out what it is they're going to do next, and whether or not they're going to stand by this peace that's been agreed, or whether or not they're going to break ranks with the rest of the Empire. And even though it's one of those ones that's really like centered in a specific era in which it happens, gosh, that is a mission and an idea that could translate so easily to the Khitomer Accords as well, where you've got that exact kind of division within the Klingon Empire.
Yeah.
The adventure that I wrote, Alternative Truths, it's not actually a Klingon mission. It's not one that you play with the Klingon core book. It is still one that you play with like a Starfleet crew, but it is definitely one where you're getting to see so much of the Klingons' perspective. All the significant NPCs, both antagonistic and friendly in the adventure, are Klingons. The adventure is set on Kronos itself and the system surrounding it in the immediate aftermath of Praxis' destruction. So I'm fascinated not just with what the experience is like immediately after peace is signed for the Klingons, but also, for the people in Starfleet, who we also know not everyone agreed with the fact that there was this peace agreed. Spoilers for the movie, but there is significant contention in both sides about whether or not this is a peace settlement that should go ahead. I love the idea of like putting a Starfleet party, thrusting them onto the front line for them to try and reconstruct some of the same arguments that we see Kirk and Spock having in the movie, because they disagree as well, and charting their own path into this undiscovered country.
Well, let's do a little spoiler warning too, because players, if you're watching this podcast, you may have to ask your GM permission to finish watching it if they plan on running this campaign, because I do kind of want to go into the puzzle pieces you put together. I read through your adventure, Michael. I want to put through the puzzle pieces of what the main conflict points are in yours. Like, what are you thrusting people into with your module?
For sure. So, alternative truth is happening, as I say, right after the end of Undiscovered Country. The Khitomer Accords are signed, credits are rolling, the theme music is going ba 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 ba, and then you're thrust into the situation of helping the Klingons with the rebuilding of the environmental fallout of the destruction of Praxis. That's our starting point, whereupon the characters are approached by a Klingon scientist, someone who used to be involved in the energy mining that used to take place on the Klingon moon. And the situation that she brings to the player's attention is that she has proof that the destruction of Praxis wasn't some accident, some tragedy that was unavoidable because no one knew it could happen, but instead was a result of careless negligence on the part of the Klingon house responsible for those energy mining operations, that she had warned them of the likely consequence of this continued greed in pursuit of resources on Praxis.
Which was mentioned in the movie. They talked about overmining of dilithium, right?
Indeed, yes. So they mentioned, so that's something that gets mentioned in like the Federation Council, and then I guess there's a bit of ambiguity about how much of that is being shared with the Klingon populace, maybe. But I then went one step further by saying not only was it caused by undercautious energy mining, but specifically this outcome was anticipated, and yet they chose not to do something about it because they figured, oh, it'll be fine. What's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is the moon explodes.
That sounds kind of familiar to modern humanity.
Right? Yes. So this is then something I had the fortune of talking about in a blog post that I wrote for Modiphius when the adventure came out. You know, just as you've said, the Klingon Empire throughout the original series being used as a stand-in for the Eastern Bloc, Soviet Union, China, and antagonism that Western powers are having with them at a time. The creators of the undiscovered country specifically reference the destruction of Praxis as being the Star Trek equivalent of the Chernobyl disaster. This terrible fallout and tragedy with enormous loss of life, which demonstrated that no, things weren't actually going okay. That wasn't a sustainable situation, and indicated that there had to be a seismic change in the way that the administration was operating. And I definitely took inspiration from that. At the time that I originally pitched this, which was a long time ago now, the Chernobyl TV series had just come out. There's a lot of content in there about what happens when people ignore scientific reality for the sake of convenience or greed, or to suit their own political agendas. At the time it came out, it was something that was many critics commented was a commentary on like the climate catastrophe, although it came out just a scant year, I think, before COVID, and then in the aftermath of that we see a lot of similar situations of people ignoring scientific reality for the sake of political expedience. In the way,
and I like that you sum it up like that too, because when I'm GMing, I want to have that social commentary or context side. So it's good that GMs listening to this right now are seeing this, because then you can kind of, I get excited as a player when I pick up on that early on. I'm like, I get to express my opinion now, through characterization, through improv. So that's cool.
Yeah, and it's such a key part of my favorite Star Trek stories as well. So it's great to bring that to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to just add that I love it when I loved it when you sent me that pitch, because that's the kind of pitches I tend not to see a lot of, and right. It's something that gives us the opportunity to show that the RPG can be like the TV show and tackle some of these big real life issues, and you put the sci-fi veneer on them. And it's great because that way somebody coming into the game who's watched the show will go, oh, I can explore some of those topics in the game as well as watching the show, and I think that helps to differentiate Star Trek Adventures from other RPGs, right? Because a lot of RPGs don't do that. Like, not to say you can't, but like, you're not likely going into a D&D game experience to do social commentary, right? That's not the point of the game, right? But I think it just shows that Star Trek Adventures can be something different, and you can tackle some of those big, heavy topics. And assuming your group wants to do it, like obviously have your session 0 with your group, have that continuing conversation with your group, and say, I want to do a story about X. Is anybody uncomfortable with that or comfortable with that or whatever? Or is that cool? And then you just go from there. But when this pitch came across my desk, I was like, yep. More of this.
Yeah. And could you modify the game? Say if I did want to play it with a Klingon troop, you as the writer, how would you have modified this if I wanted to play it with my Klingon perspective and my Klingon crew?
Absolutely. So, like all Star Trek adventures that get released by Modiphius, there is guidelines in there for how you can adapt it to a different era, or how you can adapt it to a different type of crew. And one of the ones that I think you absolutely could do for this adventure is looking at it from the Klingon perspective. In a way, looking at it from the Klingon perspective is easier. Not easier. It's more straightforward in some ways, because from the perspective of a Starfleet crew, when they're brought evidence of this conspiracy by the Klingon scientist character, they have a really difficult decision to make, because the Great House responsible is someone who has been assisting the Federation in finding peace with the Empire. So now you've got this tension between commitment to peace and commitment to truth. And that's a difficult moral dilemma to try and work out, especially from the perspective of Starfleet, which are outside of the Klingon politics. If you are playing with a Klingon party, I think it's much more directly, you might not have the same investment in maintaining the peace with the Federation, but there is certainly, although depending on your allegiance to the Khitomer Accords, you absolutely might, but there is then still a lot of the content of the adventure still very relevant as you're trying to work out a way to use this information and bring it to the attention of the Klingon population so that this great house can be brought to justice. And if you do want to take it an additional political angle, you could look at it from the perspective of how can I raise my house to take their place, maybe? How can I get an advantage from the situation?
Well, see, how I would twist that to actually keep the conflict strong in the Klingon is I would have someone doing almost like a smear campaign where if they bring these to light, they're saying, oh, you're anti Khitomer Accords, which is not true. Just being scientifically and factual is not anti Khitomer Accords, but that would be interesting to make this like a social conflict where lies and media start coming at them to try to shut down the truth too. And then that's like, well, that's a matter of honor to Klingons at this point, right? I might go that direction and get them, wrangled up with that.
Yeah, that's actually a great idea. So the only reason you're making up these lies is because you want to sabotage the Accords. Then you're like, no, I love peace.
Exactly.
It's just true.
Right. And that's a true situation people deal with nowadays too, is misinformation, right? And so a misinformation campaign from the Klingon perspective would be quite interesting. Yeah. And then you close out the so that's a good part. I'm so excited about this story. I want to go back in time and play it so bad. So then you close out with a mission brief. We know that Jim asks us when we do modules to close out with a mission brief, and you selected one of my favorite places in the Klingon Empire. So talk about that mission brief.
Yes. So the mission brief that accompanies this one is Jailbreak from Repente. And I was so excited when I was reading through your mission briefs to see that you also have a mission brief from Repente. So
I do.
We've got both angles of that covered, which is great. There's a number of ways that the adventure can go. As I say, the main thrust of the adventure is the characters deciding what they're going to do when they have this tension between peace and truce. Peace and truth in the form of a truce. You can try and help with the information being disclosed, or you can not help, but either way, the information is getting out. And either way, as part of the campaign of misinformation, the party can be smeared one way or another in how that goes down. So the mission brief that follows can directly follow from the adventure in the event that, say, some of the player characters involved are sentenced to go to Repente for their crimes against the Empire. Or it can be that the Klingon scientist character that you've been allied with is sentenced to that because she takes the fall, basically, for the crimes that have gone down. Or it can be something unrelated, but still follow from alternative truths in that a lot of the same characters might reoccur and to be set within the same period of time. But it's basically a return to the infamous prison colony from the undiscovered country, trying to find your way to rescue a prisoner who's inside the complex, or acting on behalf of Federation to maybe get some prisoners of war out of the colony now that the war is over. Lots of reasons that you might be trying to make your way out. Unfortunately, again, as we know from Undiscovered Country, the prison is run by a pretty corrupt administration. So just because you have orders and just the Empire has agreed these people should be set free, doesn't mean it'll be quite as simple as that. And then you get one of my favorite tropes in any kind of story or any kind of role-playing campaign, a jailbreak mission of you have to try and do it's almost like a reverse heist, right? You have to find a way to break out of your current situation, which again, as we know from the movie, is easier said than done.
Well, and again, I love it because like your modules that you write, it lands back on social conflict. Like I could just see the Starfleet crew around the table talking about like, I like the twist with the scientist having now become a political prisoner and being sent to Rura Penthe to shut her up. Imagine them sitting around the table and having that conversation, that undiscovered country conversation where we're going in and we're going to break laws, almost like the Sulu level, conversation. That to me, that was just like, oh, because what you want is your players having to make a bad decision for a good reason. Like that to me is great RPG, and they're going against the Admiralty. This is great, Now we have a story. So I really like the twist you put on that one with the Rura Penthe side.
Thank you. And yeah, absolutely. When the law is as unjust as we can see it be in the movie, it makes sense that the party are going to want to try and break the law in order to try to do the right thing. And there's tension there, and that's great.
Yeah, that's super, super good. Cool. All right. So I think that's a good segue, Rura Penthe, into the mission brief. So just to give people an idea of that, one of the things I wanted to do, and it was coincidental, Michael. I'm trying to, the more I write, I'm trying to think like you, because I love how I'm reading your stuff. I'm like, oh, that's such a good idea. Why didn't I think of that? But something I did in Starfleet Academy mission briefs, you made it so under the adding this mission to your campaign part that you had this continuing story going on where the cadets are building up into their, first assignment as ensign, hopefully their promotion to ensign. I know I didn't have that when I built this, but coincidentally, in my adding this mission to your campaign, I went to the core rule book and looked up the Klingon dictates on page 81 of the Klingon core rule book. And I remember when I was trying to build this, I was like, ooh, I'm trying to really get into Klingon culture. And to me, those dictates are equal to Ferengi rules of acquisition, right? And I was like, how can we wrap each mission to play around this? Now, there's only 6 Klingon dictates. So I still had 4 other missions I had to write beyond that, but I started there. And one of the things that I wanted to accomplish with it was, whereas your mission starts post explosion of Praxis, my mission starts post Khitomer Accords. So when Chancellor Azit Burr is on her way home, basically. And I really wanted to get in the background of what's going on. And what about, Chang, General Chang, in order for him to even accomplish and got where he was with a prototype bird of prey, he wasn't doing it on his own. This was a mass conspiracy. So I was like, there's no way these Klingons shut up about it. And what about these Klingons who were in deep space missions? And they were coming back and saying, while we were gone, they did what? You didn't even consult us? And so each one of these mission briefs during the part where I focus on the Klingon dictates is about those conflicts that are happening, arguments on board. I mean, the ship's cook. I started with the ship's cook, one of the most important positions on a ship, right? And this person is in the middle of, we've all been to family dinners. These are some of the most potentially explosive situations. And so I started with a family dinner situation, and then really went from there piece by piece. So it was that fracture of the Klingon Empire, the houses I wanted to focus on. And then I wanted to end with a couple of my other favorite Klingon subjects, some that have not been on screen. One, the Choltho. No, I just mispronounced it. The Klingons who are genetically altered to look like other species.
Oh, yes. Yeah. The species reassignment.
Jim, do you know? Is it Choltho?
I can't remember what it's called.
Remind me, which one?
The Klingons who take surgical alteration in order to look like other species, and they're the spies of the Klingons, basically.
Not the Kuka, or
there we go.
I'm killing the pronunciation.
Oh yeah, I was doing the pronunciation from the eastern side of the empire, which is Chultho, but you're right, it's called. That's always fascinated me, because what's sad to say is, for them doing such huge sacrifice, they are viewed as some of the most dishonorable people. And so I wanted to write around that premise. And then finally, my premise, which I always wonder about too, is like, what does first contact missions look like for Klingons? When they go to a planet, what do? They're no way like the Federation. They don't have a prime directive. And so I wanted to give people who are playing Klingon crews, of course, I didn't even state that. The Khitomer Accords mission brief is if you're playing a Klingon crew. So I wanted to give people the aspect to look at that with first contact. How could you adapt these to a Federation crew? Is you could easily make this entire set an initial exchange of characters. So maybe because the Khitomer Accords have been signed, there's now going to be an officer exchange. And so you could easily have it where if you play only maybe with 2 or 3 players, that those 2 or 3 players have been asked to join, as it were, on the way back to the Klingon Empire, and they get involved in these 10 missions of what it's like, officer exchange missions. That would be something that you could adapt if you are playing with the Federation crew.
Yeah, and it would be a brilliant set of adventures to play through from that perspective. It's really interesting hearing you talk about how the original ones in the pack all have their roots in the Klingon dictates, because it was something that jumped out to me immediately reading through the mission briefs. You've got a set of 10 of them, and the first 5 are all Klingons fighting Klingons. And that's exactly what dictates and values are for, right? To introduce that kind of conflict within the self, conflict within the crew, conflict with other members who are supposed to be part of your society. And I think that's an element of role-playing games which I find really interesting and fascinating. We could all get together to go off and fight some kind of bad guy that everyone agrees is a bad thing. But when you get to the internal conflict within your crew or within yourself, there's so much good drama and story and role play in that.
Yeah, Jim, I have a question for you. Those Klingon dictates, they've never been stated in Star Trek, the TV show or movies, correct? Where did those pull from?
I think they're all based on canon, right? I think I'd have to pull up the book in front of me. I don't have them handy, but I'm confident that they were all based on stuff that's happened in the show. I don't know that they're necessarily spelled out exactly with those dictates, but
I thought that they. Yeah, I thought they're kind of key, because that's what the point with Michael. I wanted to make it so that if crews were arguing about this, that it could be used as a positive or negative. Value if they're played in here. So I was just wondering if it was pulled from a novel, the way that they were all listed.
No, now you're going to make me pull them up and have to go look, because I'm willing to bet that a lot of them were probably snippets of dialogue, right? That some Klingon said in an episode. And just like values, right? You pull out the great pieces of dialogue and like, yep, that's a Klingon thing. That's a Klingon thing. Like own the day or today's a good day to die. I mean, those are just classics. But there's other examples if you do a little digging.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the first one and immediately recognizing that as dialogue, because you've got nothing is more honorable than victory, which is definitely a Worf quote and resonates with something that I think is really interesting about the Klingons, is their relationship with their honor, which is another thing that would then be really fascinating to explore in the context of a game. We mentioned earlier about the ways in which the Klingons were inspired by Eastern civilizations and how the concept of the relationship Klingons have with their honor is something which stemmed from perhaps not entirely accurate understandings of things like Code of Bushido or similar kind of like warrior traditions. And it reminds me of something that I heard someone say, a historian in Japanese history, saying, the extent to which people lived and died and Bushido was an absolutely central part of their life is generally very overstated by fiction. It's something much more closely equivalent to, say, a US senator having a American flag lapel pin or something pinned to their suit. It's definitely something that you have to pay lip service to, but it's not necessarily something that's going to be central to how you live your life. And then exploring that within the context of a session can be really interesting, because, of course, honor is going to be something that matters a lot more to some Klingons than others. I always think it's something that's a very endearing trait of Worf, is, of course, honor means a great deal for him. He's the Klingon who was raised by humans. He doesn't have the context for the broader understanding of what this actually means within Klingon society. So it's all just amazing stuff to use in the game.
Yeah, when I've dreamt about playing a Klingon game, and to that point, whereas you have the Federation with Prime Directive, and then you have the Klingons with honor, my thing is, are the actions of your Klingon worthy of song by the end of the mission? Meaning, if you've done things that are scurrilous or cowardly or attacked the innocent, you don't put that in a Klingon song. And so I was like, if I ever had to play this, my thing is like, okay, at the end of the mission, I'm going to give you points based on whether what you did could be put in song. And if not, if it's embarrassing, then that's a minus reputation point. That's how I always thought I would figure it if I ran a Klingon campaign.
And then by the end of the campaign, you've got all the verses you need for your Klingon opera. So
and just chat, throw everything they did into Chat GPT and have it write a song for you. That they could all sing around. And how cool if you made your players all sing the song around the table that whatever got written. How cool would that be?
I know we're not to the riff part yet, but just listening to you to talk about this, it makes me think that we did the Klingon core rule book before Dune, right? And of course, Dune RPG has all those great mechanics and devices about houses and politics and all the shenanigans that go on around that. If we have an opportunity to do a revised Klingon book for second edition, it would be really cool to incorporate more of that stuff into it. If only because like I can see how the inter-house tensions in the Klingon Empire has been a thing from the very beginning, right? I mean, all the way back in the 22nd century, there's a through line through Discovery into the 23rd century, 24th century with like the Duras, House of Duras and the House of Moog, and like it's a through line, right? And then
you know what I love about that, Jim? Let me tell you why I love that. I don't know if you played the Dune game yet, but there's a sheet you get on the Dune game for every year of activity that your house does, because think of it almost like the Federation Klingon war campaign, right? We know that there's all this stuff happening, and then you can choose to zoom in and play a mission. So with Dune, what's so cool, and you talked about that legacy house like Moog or Duras or Gorkon, like you could say, you know what, we're going to play 20 years leading up to this mission, and we're going to see how all your assets change and allies and what's fallen apart. And that creates that rich legacy of Klingon tapestry that people go back and talk about. This, you dishonored my family 10 years ago, and for that I kill you today. Stuff like that is like all Dune. But man, if you made a 2E version of the Klingon Empire book, that'd be sick.
It reminds me of what you're saying reminds me of Pendragon, right? Because in Pendragon, right, you create a knight, and then you advance that knight through his career, and then the intention of the game is that character will have children and then die, and you will then continue on playing his son or his sons. And so over time you build this whole legacy of your not so much of your house necessarily, but of your family. And you get like there's rules for like developing manners and develop like a house, not like your personal manners, but like a manor. And you can have in fact, the character generation, you go back and you develop your grandfather and your father, and like their history ties into your glory, right? So your starting character's glory is impacted by what your father did or your grandfather did at different battles in history, right?
Oh, that's sick.
I could easily see that get tied somehow. Like, I don't know if Dune already has that, but like you could set it up so like you're playing you create a Klingon character who already has a backstory and heritage and history that they're pulling on because of either the honor or dishonor of their forebears, and then you can carry it forward. It's like what you're saying, where if you're playing a campaign that's 20 years prior, right, you could be playing your character's son or daughter. Well, what's cool, and they're reacting to stuff that happened 100 years ago.
Yeah, and what's cool about that too, and sorry, people, we're going to take this into riffing, I see, which is good. We should now because one of the cool things with Dune, Jim, is you have to pick your house's major industry, and you have to pick its minor industry. You can have maybe several minor industries. The more industries you have, the harder it is to manage, of course. But what I thought about when I was playing Dune and then seeing the Klingon campaign, there's so many things you don't see in the Klingon Empire that are necessary. For instance, who raises targs? Who, and let's go even better than that. Who produces the food that targs eat? Who runs that house? Wait, let's go even better than that. Who produces who makes and manufactures the pens that hold targs on a ship? You can keep going all the way to the person who does the buttons of the gate that opens for the, and to me, I was like, oh, I love industry. I love business anyways. And so the houses you could create would make amazing stories. Like, who runs the house for Klingon opera? Like, you could really get into it. And then finally, once you build, like you said, with Pendragon, all your heritage, now you can say, okay, now we start playing, and you really know what makes your character tick and what's going to make them mad. If someone disparages this opera, you're going to have a fight in the lunch, so that's a great concept.
And I think the Klingon core book, I remember Nathan and I and the other writers, I think we intentionally put in an entire alternative life path, so that you could have. In fact, I think that's where we first started scratching the idea that there could be different phases of one of the life path steps, where instead of you going to Starfleet or Homeworld or whatever, there's like artistic, and there's like different castes. I think it was. I'm trying to remember what the terminology was, but just not only do you have your house, but you've also got these different castes that you're related to, and like you could just, like you were saying, you just drill down into every possible industry and fit it into one of those castes, and then maybe your house is really well known for exploration, but also they're really good at making Klingon poetry or something. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that you could fold into each of them.
We did June House Generation last week for my home game, and they chose couture fashion as their primary focus. So that immediately is going to suggest a very, very different kind of game. And I think you could absolutely do the same with Klingon Empire Star Trek story, where the choice you make right then has such an impact for the rest of the game.
Well, get this. I chose for our house games. So our house in Dune we're creating games, and the reason why that was as important, because puzzles, games, intrigue, people used our stuff for thought exercises to really help develop their thinking ability, and it ended up turning out, and I said our game, this is my solo campaign that I'm building to play with the group, because I'm helping build a house for that. And how that grew, and again, this could apply to Klingons, the gaming and stuff like that, is that the house that they live in is a moving puzzle. So if you come in to assassinate them, the halls actually shift and everything, because it's built like a giant labyrinth puzzle, which they also design in handheld. So if you know and memorize the handheld game, you actually can get around their castle. So that's how deep you can get with Dune, is you can take one little concept and say, okay, how does this expand even more? And you could do the same thing with the Klingon Empire if you wanted to. All right, Jim, I know you had some other riff ideas too. So what were you thinking about when it comes to?
So we the first one, I think is related to something we were just talking about, but we can expand on it a little bit. Is just the idea that which one do I want to start with? So the first one, it was you two were talking about how there's great references in the 23rd century about the different houses intercompeting, and then leading into the Cold War, and then leading into the Khitomer Accords and all those issues that are happening. There's a through line from the 22nd century all the way through that you can actually pull on. Canon doesn't do a great job of it, of course, because they don't have the time and the means to take the entire tapestry and pull it together. But as RPG writers, we do have that ability, right? In our books, we can put the dots together and present a logical through line of what probably happened just based on what we see, without having to add a lot of new canon, right? We don't have to sit here and add a bunch of canons or make up a bunch of stuff to say how we got from Broken Bow all the way out to the Khitomer Accords, right? There is a through line there. You just have to take the time to put the pieces together. And I think Discovery, like I know a lot of fans don't like Discovery, but a lot of fans love Discovery. I love Discovery. And I think something Discovery showed us about the Klingon Empire that we haven't really seen a lot of, except maybe a little bit in Next Gen, was the interhouse rivalries and issues and stuff that were happening. Like, especially that first season of Discovery, there's a lot of stuff going on. If you start picking it apart, like there are at least 4 or 5 separate houses that are really well represented by specific characters. And they've all got their own things going on, and they've got their own little specialties. And like one's super sneaky, like was it Mogai is super sneaky, and the other ones are got other things going on. And if you really take the time and start pulling that stuff apart and piecing it together, you can see, okay, well, there's 24 houses, right? 24 major houses that we're only seeing like 4 or 5 of them. But there's so much more you could do with them. And I think Keith DeCanada, when he wrote his section of the Klingon core book, he went into some detail on some of those specific houses, and we had the license for Discovery, but we couldn't use it at the time, which was super frustrating. But he tried to write around it a little bit so we could kind of like suggest on where things were going.
Well, before you pass that up to, I want to talk about that real quick, because since Dune is out right now, the second movie, and they're going a little bit more into the houses, you said 24 major houses. And I like saying that because there's a lot of other minor houses that are trying to get into that major position. And in Discovery Season 1, actually, the reason I like Discovery Season 1, besides Philip Georgiou, is that we see this insight into Klingons. And I know some people who disparaged Discovery were kind of mad because of how the Klingons were represented. But I remind them that we may have been seeing houses that were the most extreme too. I mean, come on, they were eating the flesh of the defeated.
Mhm.
This was not maybe a normal time for Klingons. This could have been a time of extremism. So your job as an RPG writer, or even if you were sitting in the writer room at CBS, is to make that make sense. And I always encourage people, if something gets you, sit there and get creative with me and say, but why did this happen? Oh, now that's interesting. You are creative. So I just wanted to stop you there, because some people who are like, no, I can't think of anything Discovery. Well, why can't you write it in as part of your story?
Right. And no, and I think that's great, Michael. And I think you could very easily pull on modern politics to tie into that, right? Like, we have political parties all around the world that are not one unified political party, right? They have their extremists on both sides, plus the centrists and a little bit of variation in the middle, right? So you've got
usually the extremists end in power.
Yeah, exactly, right. So you got the far left, you got the far right. Even within one political party who might be far right, you got within that party, you got the extremists on both. I mean, there's all kinds of levers that you can play with, right? So yeah, I mean, totally. Some of the houses may be like really, really extreme, and some of them are like, "Why are you doing that? That's a little bit too much." And the other ones are like, "No, we're going a different direction." But yeah, totally. Like, and then even thinking of sliders, like the 24 houses in a moment of time, like some are probably on the upswing, some are on the downswing, some are staying stable, and then you've got all these minor houses that some of them might be. In fact, I guess it makes me think of Game of Thrones to some extent too, right? You've got all these minor houses that maybe they're perfectly content to ally themselves with major houses just to be, secure and safe or whatever. Maybe there's minor houses that want to become a major house and want to figure out, okay, who do we assassinate or blackmail or frame for something, and then we can get into their position. So I mean, there's all kinds of things that could be happening in the Klingon Empire that we know canonically have always happened, right? So like and this is the next riff thing that I wanted to talk about, was like using all this information and knowledge that we know about the 22nd and 23rd and 24th centuries, and how would that inform a Klingon campaign in the 25th century, where we don't really know what happens after Picard, right? We don't know what the heck the Klingons are up to because they didn't show us on the TV show. Like, where'd the Klingons go? Where are they? I mean,
well, let's riff. Can we go around the room and actually riff about that? Because that got me going. And don't even take me into the 32nd century, right?
Well, that'd be the next step. Yeah.
That's very let's all riff right now. We don't see the Klingons in Picard. Where are they now?
Yeah, so as you were talking then about the political division and the diversity of factions that you've got to assume exists within Klingon politics and the different Klingon houses, it immediately put me in mind of some of the conversations that Dax has with Worf at the very end of Deep Space Nine, commenting in the way that the structure of Klingon imperial politics is so utterly dysfunctional that it only is able to exist as a society by the good people like Worf deciding to stomach, for the sake of honor and for the sake of the greater good, all of the terrible things that are happening with the corrupt, bigoted, warmongering figures which the structure of Klingon imperial politics have allowed to float to the top of the pile and then cause so much disruption and so much hardship for everyone else. Now, we know that where we ended Deep Space Nine is we have a new chancellor, and we have a new chancellor who is perhaps better disposed towards Starfleet and the Federation and some of the other great powers of the galaxy than others. A war hero, it's fair to say, someone who has just brought the Klingon Empire to victory over the Dominion. But maybe someone who doesn't have the same appetite for immediately plunging right into the next war, given all the loss of life and other hardship that comes along with that conflict. So I guess I'd like to think that the Klingon Empire is in a better place, that it is transitioning from a war footing to a place of peace. But that in itself is an echo of the Khitomer Accords and an echo of the end of the Federation Klingon War, where we have a moment of the Klingons attempting to make the dismount from a war footing to existing in peacetime, which is always a very, very sensitive time for the Empire, because that kind of militarism is such a defining part of how the Klingons perceive themselves and their culture. So
Yeah.
I'd like to think that things are getting better, but you have to assume it's a very, very sensitive time. You have to assume that there are certain factions within the Klingon Empire who see the destruction of Romulus as an excellent opportunity to get one over on their hated enemies. Or the fact that the Federation, in the aftermath of the Dominion War, are weaker than they might otherwise be, or who even want to pursue the Dominion to gain vengeance for all the people that they lost during the war that just fought. So I think there's a great game opportunity there in trying to modulate that extremism to try and find a more peaceful and sustainable path to the Empire, or whatever succeeds the Empire.
And Jim, where do you think they are now by the time Picard rolls around?
Yeah, I think I mean, just based on what we know from Lower Decks and a little bit of Picard, like things are stable between the Empire and the Federation for that the end of by the end of the 24th century, right? So heading into the late 80s and the early 90s, things are relatively stable. But as Martok gets older and Worf is off doing his thing with the Federation or Starfleet intelligence, right? He's not he can't possibly be the ambassador to Kronos anymore. He must have switched over to Intel at some point. But I want to be the optimist and say Martok keeps it together, and there's a smooth transition of power from him to whoever the next chancellor is going to be. But who knows, right? There's been enough internal strife in the Klingon Empire for hundreds of years that doesn't just magically go away because of one person, right? I mean, it would come back, and just because Michael, Dismuke, I know you love conflict, and I know you love creating conflict with your characters and your players and stuff. I think it's such a rich opportunity for something fresh to happen. And maybe there's a couple splinter houses that say, you know what, we do have a broken Romulan empire that we can go take advantage of. We do have a Federation that's weak. Maybe they're not worthy allies anymore. Maybe some new threat in the galaxy rears its head, and the Federation's not quick to jump into it because they just finished the freaking Dominion War, right? They're tired, right? They want to get back to science, maybe, but the Klingons are like, nope, this is on our doorstep. We're going to take the lead this time, and knowing that they don't have to worry about the Romulans, knowing that they don't necessarily have to worry about the Federation, maybe they take some bold steps forward. I don't know. I think I will admit I'm a little disappointed that canon didn't give us anything Klingon wise, especially in that last season of Picard. I would have thought that somebody would come help the Earth with the Borg situation, but it was just like the Earth by themselves, which felt a little weird, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, there's some other things we didn't see, which shocked me, which I was like, okay, well, what's going on? We didn't see any more Klingons, despite Worf have been such an honored officer. We didn't see any Klingons intermixed as other Federation officers anywhere on those shows. And I was like, okay, how do they just completely withdraw? I went, no one said I'm moving to the Federation because it's better than being on Kronos. None of that happened according to canon. And so I'm with both of you, where I think that there was probably this major withdrawal, like internalization to get stronger. If I was a Klingon, I'd be like, you know what? We actually don't need to fight the Federation. They've been picking themselves apart pretty well. They have so much infighting and destabilization with the shapeshifters and stuff going on. I think we're going to just let them die. But there is such an opportunity with the Romulans because, correct me if I'm wrong, according to canon, the Klingons would have been around way longer in the Beta Quadrant than the Romulans, who immigrated from Vulcan.
Mm-hmm.
So and the Herc could have been all over that region. So I could see now the Klingons saying, this is our opportunity to gain back old territory.
Mm-hmm.
We've never heard what happened on that side of the Beta Quadrant and had the war. They have their own neutral zone. And we know there's that pass that passes between there. But I could definitely see, like, we're going to have way better opportunities taking over Romulan worlds than we're ever going to have getting into the Federation and establishing territory there. So I could see the quick grab for territory on the inner Romulan Empire and a lot of adventure happening there.
Yeah, I mean, even with the former Cardassian Union too, right? Like, I think some of the episodes highlighted the fact that the Klingons had taken
Cardassian
territory, Cardassian territory and weren't eager to give it back, right? So like, who's to say they don't just drop the occupying force on a couple of former Cardassian planets and say, oh, we're helping keep the peace and maintaining order, and we're just going to camp out here for a while and eventually just part of the Klingon Empire.
And now you're seeing, really, I'm going to go into some social comparisons again. If you think about like Russia trying to annex its former territory again, you could have a lot there. It's like, should the Federation get involved all the way over there when we have enough problems over here going on? So yeah, maybe that's what's going on, which is why we don't see them, is that they've rediverted all of their forces and expansionist policies to different regions of space. There's plenty of it to go around.
I will say that. Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that whilst certainly, old habits die hard, there's centuries of bad blood between the Klingons and the Romulans, so you've got to assume there would definitely be a significant faction wanting to take advantage of the destruction of Romulus. The flip side of that is Klingons and Romulans have just fought on the same sides of the war. How often does that happen? And you've got to assume that, especially for Klingons, bonds forged under fire, bonds forged in conflict, you've got to assume they're going to be very strong. So I would like to think there are at least some Klingon houses who fought alongside the Romulans, who fought and died for each other, who might have a very different perspective on the Empire and Romulans these days, and who might react to their sudden need with compassion.
You make a really good point, and here's the reason why too. We played this in my RPG game, the hypocrisy of the Federation in saving the Klingon Empire but not saving the Romulan Empire. And the Klingon, if I didn't want to do a pew pew battle, I would have the Klingons and Romulans working on more of a political thing, like why infinite diversity, infinite combination. No, this is what happened in our game. The Vulcans were finally looking for a chance to wipe out the Romulans out of shame for history, out of what they did. And so the Klingons could politicize that and be like, yeah, they have no honor, the Federation. They saved us because they were scared of us. So they knew they don't want us coming over here. But the first opportunity, they could let the Hobus Star die and wipe out the Romulans. They decided, oh, we got too much to do. That's what we played in my game. And it created quite the conflict for the players, especially since we have a Romulan captain. And so I could see, to your point, Michael, this doesn't have to be a necessary fight. It could be, hey, this is going to be a long-term strategy with honorable foes who became friends. And we're going to turn this on the Federation and find a way to make like a propaganda mission. Don't join this Federation. We'll take care of you, because when it gets hot, they're only going to take advantage of you or let you die.
Interesting. So yeah, I think Michael Duxbury, you raised a great point about about some of the Romulan factions and the Klingon houses being allies after the war. We could also tie in the whole element from Next Generation, where the Romulans were working with the House of Duras, right? And then that whole Klingon Civil War happened, and you had the Empire fracture, where some were on Martok and Gowron's side, and some were on the Duras' family, and like there was a lot of interfactional stuff going on there. That didn't just magically go away either. Those tensions are still there, I'm sure, right? Like old especially Klingons, hold grudges for decades and centuries, right? So like there's no reason we couldn't pull that thread in. So all those tensions were happening during the Dominion War, but they just kind of maybe suppressed them to get the war done because they were fighting the Dominion. But once the war is done, the Romulan Empire collapses. You still got these interconnections happening with certain Romulans and certain houses. House of Duras is still there, like what was his name? Duras' son. I just drew a blank on Duras' son's name, but he probably survived the war, right? Or for our purposes, he survived the war. He is now the leader of maybe a resurgent House Duras with former Romulan backing, whatever that's worth, and could maybe make a play for the council again or something.
Well, we've talked about this too. We also have Alexander. We have Miral.
Yeah.
So you have some people who, if they form together, like that would be an interesting group of people, especially what if Alexander ends up marrying Miral later on, as they get older and stuff like that. Like there's a lot you could do with this. So you do have Klingons who are pro-Federation.
Yeah. I mean, hell, you could even throw in that who was Quark's Klingon wife, right? That thing. She's got a connection to Quark, and he's got a connection to the Ferengi, right? So maybe you got that house who has some financial acumen, and they can have an angle in there too.
Oh my goodness! Wait! You just blew my mind. What if the Ferengi?
Grilka, that was her name.
Grilka. What if the Ferengi saw an opportunity with the Klingons? Like, we'll help you stabilize your economy, like for and just make your houses even richer and stronger and stuff. Like that would be a really interesting way to play is Ferengi allying with Klingon for to building their economy.
It's funny because whilst all of these are such guaranteed sources of conflict, obviously that's great for the game. The optimist in me is always thinking of, well, just like in the Dominion War, how is it that these old enemies can come together and find new friendships and find a new way to build something together? Right. Jim was talking about the House of Duras and all the problems that they caused for the Empire, for the Federation, for everyone who got caught in the middle. And how many people would have been delighted to see them fall from power over the course of those story arcs. Well, guess who becomes everyone's best friend when suddenly you ally with the Romulans and you need someone who has a really tight and strong relationship with the Romulan Empire? That could be a chance for the House of Duras to redeem themselves, to find a way of helping the Federation and the Empire to work with the Romulans, because traditionally the Federation and the Klingons have a terrible relationship with the Romulans. So you need to have someone interceding between them. Maybe they could get on with Spock.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, we had been toying around with the idea, myself and Jim, with Thomas Maroney, because in Star Trek Online, they created a ship called the Khitomer. And the Khitomer ship was a ambassadorial flagship with Romulans, Klingons, and Federation. And it's a beautiful design ship if you take a look at it from STO, the Khitomer. And we were like, oh, what would happen if the setting was 2402 or 2410, and you have this ambassadorial flagship trying to unite these three empires because they run, 1/4 of the galaxy almost or something. What would be the new challenges that they have to deal with in the future, to your point, Duxbury, about, okay, let's have a happy ending and new challenges on top of that.
Yeah, I love the idea of pulling Spock into it, because like we saw in Strange New Worlds, he was having that great connection with the Klingon captain after the first episode of season 2, where he goes down to the planet and he's drinking blood wine with them, right? And like, a Vulcan that drinks blood wine, this is unheard of, right? But clearly, Spock being Spock, he created connections and relationships with everybody, right? Romulans and Klingons alike. And maybe prior to the Hobus supernova, but after the Dominion War, maybe Spock is somehow machinating connections between the Romulans and the Klingons, but also meanwhile trying to get the Vulcans and the Romulans reunified. All kinds of, and then you get your player characters involved in that somehow, no matter what faction your player characters are. They could be Federation, Klingon, Romulan, Cardassian,
Fenris Rangers.
I mean, there's so many directions you could go with this. But I think the Klingons being as important as they are to the franchise, they can't possibly just go away post Picard. Like, they've got to be a present, important piece of it. And I'm still pissed off that they just didn't even touch on them. I want to see Legacy, or I want to see something pick up after Picard, just so we can see, well, what's happening with the Klingons, what's happening with the Romulans, what's happening with everybody. We need to see that next step that leads us into the temporal Cold War, I guess.
Yeah, even a name drop. I love how they name drop Janeway, and that gives me the satisfaction, like, okay, she's still out there doing good work.
Right. Right.
A random idea that just came to me for another direction that the Klingon Empire could be going at this time: a haven for synthetic life. Synthetic life is not welcome in the Federation at this time, and it's certainly not welcome in whatever the successor states of the Romulan Empire is.
Oh, I love that.
Oh man, what a great idea.
Wow. Okay. This is where I need 30 seconds just to let all this spiral into ideas. So a haven for synthetic life. So they fled there. And how would the Romulans how would the Klingons treat them? And the reason why I say, going back to my mispronouncing Cholko or whatever that is, there are houses in the Klingon Empire who don't mind doing major surgical alteration to create infiltrators. So now you have synthetic life you have as an option instead. Would they go that route? That's so Romulan of them. If they did that, I'm doing the dark side. But yeah, but going to happy stories, what benefits would synthetic life have to the Klingons that they could use, you know?
Yeah, I imagine the Empire would be in return looking to take advantage of the military capabilities of synthetic life, which is where you find the dark angle on that story. But yeah, it's definitely uncharted territory, and that's very exciting for the context of an RPG.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think there's got to be a major house or a couple minor houses that watch what happens on Mars really closely and say, "Hey, look what all those synthetics just did to Utopia Planitia in a heartbeat." That's interesting. And there's some devious Klingon scientists and engineers or whatever who probably have a very good relationship with their Federation neighbors who are really good engineers and scientists. And might have some research and go, oh, look at these synthetics that we could create super soldiers. And not, I guess you'd have to play with the whole honor idea, right? Is it honorable to create 10 soldiers and go send them off on the front lines? Are they taking your honor away, or is it honorable to do that? I mean, of course, the Romulan or the Klingon honor system is squishy, right? It's like
the prime directive.
Like the prime directive, right? It's things are honorable or not honorable depending on the context.
Yeah. Well, both of you speaking, I get chills up my spine because I almost feel like the Klingon Empire at this time period is internalizing to become stronger. I just feel that they're like, okay, we're not going to be wiping, like we're not going to be taking out this, that, and I feel like they're consolidating for almost like imploding to explode. And what does that look like? We don't know. And what forces are inside trying to make the decision on what that explosion looks like. You know, so that would be a fascinating time period to play.
Yeah, and I think Duxbury, I think you hit on it really, really well earlier in the conversation, where we would have to go back to that last season, the last couple seasons of DS9, and really pull apart Dax's commentary to Worf about I think at one point I think she even comes right out and says the Empire's dying, and it's because of all the issues that are happening internally. And then of course Worf kills Gowron and hands the chancellorship to Martok. But there was some very specific commentary in there that could very easily be pulled apart and used as a reference through the rest of the 24th century, and then imagining what happens next for the Klingon Empire. I think internalizing, stepping back a little bit from galactic politics, figuring out their internal stuff, and then what comes out on the other end is
with you saying that, I almost feel like they would become an even more spiritual people.
Maybe.
Like having gone through their own personal Armageddon and collapse, what comes out on the other side of that would be fascinating.
Yeah, because Dax's comment is that I think the Empire is dying, and I think the Empire needs to die. And that's for a lot of the reasons that we've discovered, that it is an inherently corrupt and imperialistic and exploitative organization. So I guess what's next for the Klingon Empire, I guess my dream is it's not an empire anymore. It has transitioned into a different form of entity. And obviously that's not something that happens overnight. That's something that is going to provoke a lot of conflict and challenges, all of which are fantastic to roleplay through. And then who knows what it ends up looking like, because it's probably going to take several centuries before you know.
That's a beautiful story.
Wow, this is awesome. But both of you raised great points. Like it's because you've got the different monasteries that could maybe step up and say, well, maybe we need to go back to our roots and remember this clone of the emperor that we have hanging around doing nothing. He's a figurehead. We could stand him up and use him as a representative of what's best in Klingon and move forward with that.
I almost see them finding a kinship with the Bajorans, who, when pushed, they became fighters. And I don't want to face a Bajoran in battle, believe me, right? They'll take you out. And I really see them honoring, like, the Bajorans stopped the Cardassian Empire. They held off the Cardassian Empire through really spirituality, right? And I could see a kinship between the Klingons maybe looking for guidance from the Bajorans, or maybe another orb gets introduced, the orb of Kahless. I don't know, but I could just see this happen. I think that's the direction I would go, is a more spiritual tone Klingons internalizing, trying to re-educate people and preserve their culture. Interesting.
Yeah. One of the thoughts I've just been noodling on for the last couple of months, just haven't had anything to do with it, but it was just like, oh, because I've been rewatching Strange New Worlds. And I had, in order to rewatch Strange New Worlds, I had to rewatch the first 2 seasons of Discovery, of course, because you gotta, right? So get that through line. And I really loved the episodes with they're focusing on the time crystals and the Klingon monastery with all that stuff. And I almost wonder, is there a story that you could pull together and riff up where maybe this new Klingon entity, whether it's an empire or a republic or whatever, maybe there's a stronger focus on science and time travel and time crystals, and maybe they are a spark that ignites the temporal war in a couple, because like you give them a century or two to like stabilize and get sorted, but then you got these time crystals become more public knowledge, and then all of a sudden this other species gets hold of it, sparks off the temporal war in the 27th century. Shenanigans happen all over the place, crazy things are happening, because it just seems like an easy connection point, like, oh, Klingons got time crystals, they know more about time travel than they're letting on and sharing clearly, and how does that impact the temporal war? Like maybe they play a leading role in trying to circumvent the bad things from happening from this other species that sparked it off.
Man, so many ideas. Okay.
Yeah.
And Michael,
this one more though.
Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say, I'm teasing Michael.
If you guys don't want to riff on that, that's totally cool. But
no, I actually do. I wanted to, because to me, my mind focuses, like, once I hear something that's like a really good idea, I try to take everything yes and that whole time crystal thing. If I was just like the Bajorans are looking into the orbs to try to guide their future and get insights, I totally could see the religious order of Klingons using the time crystals in the same way. Say, hey, you know what? We need to survive. Can we predict our future and figure out how to guide this people? And so the use of time crystals almost becomes just as spiritual as orbs.
Ooh, yeah. I like it. I like that. That's cool. The last one, this is relatively minor. It's just adding more context to one of the things we've already talked about, where I just connected I potentially connected a dot between the Klingons researching synthetic life forms to the Jem'Hadar, because the Klingons just spent a whole war fighting the Jem'Hadar, and they saw the value or challenges in a genetically engineered super soldier that does your bidding, and it's just basically cannon fodder. You just send it on the front lines, and they just kill until they're all dead. But maybe the Klingons are like, well, what if we could create a synthetic Jem'Hadar that wasn't dependent on Ketracel White, and we could turn off whenever we needed to, so there was no chance of them rebelling against us or having it, because clearly we saw in DS9 that in some cases the Jem'Hadar did turn on their Vorta, or did turn on their founders for whatever reasons, like the Alphas did, so more so than the Gammas. But the Klingons had firsthand experience dealing with the Jem'Hadar. In fact, some of them were in that imprisonment camp, right, and got to see all kinds of aspects of them. So maybe some of the super smart Klingons said, hey, we could build a better Jem'Hadar using synthetic life forms, and they tie in that whole Mars experience, where they just saw the Mars synthetics just obliterate Utopia Planitia, and they could build something better and different. So maybe there's a faction of Klingons that now have an army of super synthetics.
Yeah, and I could see an ideology. Get this, I'm going to really pull now. I could see that they get the synthetics in as they expand. We don't know what they've been doing expanding galactic eastward, that they finally run into the Hirogen, who we know use synthetic life forms to quell their hunting thing. And I could see the Hirogens and Klingons getting along really well. Like, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. And then with the whole synthetic, that maybe that's what they're doing, is building also the strength of that, because they're eventually going to run into each other, Hirogen and, according to the Star Trek map, they're going to be running into each other sooner than the Federation will run back into the Hirogen.
Yeah. And we haven't even talked about the Tholians and the Gorn, right? The Klingons have histories with both of those species too, and who's to say what they could do with that?
Yeah, that's good stuff.
lots of great stuff to play with, man. I love the fact like the franchise.
Michael was about to say something.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah.
It was to go in a different direction entirely, which is just throwing out another option we've not considered for what is the future of the Klingons, or what is the future of the Klingon Empire if there is no Klingon Empire anymore. And I'd like to at least raise the possibility that maybe the future of the Klingons is they join the Federation. Mm-hmm. Like, if you see the Empire as something that ultimately is going to fall because the focus on military pursuits and the way in which that exploits people within and without the Klingon Empire is not something that is sustainable, is there then scope for them to discover, actually, maybe we're stronger if we're part of something that isn't just committed to a militarist ideology, and then become part of that, become part of something that is greater than what they previously were. I don't see them being the first people to join up to Federation at this time. I think it would be a more logical starting point would be for the Federation to assume the Romulans, because the Roman Empire has essentially collapsed entirely at this point, or at least into lots of smaller client states that we don't know many details about. But I think that there is scope for, at some point, the construction of a singular galactic community.
I think that's absolutely perfectly fitting the Star Trek ideal, right? Like we already know, it's already been hinted at in secondary canon, like the novels and the comic books and stuff, that of course Nog, right? Ferengi join Starfleet, Bajorans join Starfleet, Romulans can join Starfleet. We already got Worf as a Klingon in Starfleet. So maybe they do formally just join the Federation, and then the remnants of the Romulans join the Federation. Maybe there's a new Romulan Republic that comes along at some point in the 25th century. And by the way, all this stuff that we're talking about is stuff that player characters could easily influence, right? Play yourself a Federation captain who plays an integral role in helping to form the Romulan Republic and then bringing them into the Federation. Maybe the Bajorans finally join the Federation. Maybe Grand Nagus Nog decides, you know what, maybe we need to make some reforms, and maybe it's okay if we ally ourselves with the Federation, if not necessarily join them outright. Maybe they stay independent. I don't know. But yeah, maybe heading into the 25th, 26th centuries, maybe there is a larger unified Federation that is every key major species, and then moving on to something new and amazing, right? Sure, totally. I'm all.
Wow. So look, Michael, your module and my briefs, and we completely world built. And I'm dying to play a Klingon campaign one day, and I want to play it like Dune. I really do. Yeah. And Legacy. So maybe one day I'll find the time and get to do that.
Figure out some way to combine the best bits of Dune and the best bits of Pendragon to get all that history in there for your character. And then like build that character's like family's backstory, and then carry it forward. That would be so cool.
Oh
man,
play
the next generation.
The next generation.
Go the entire arc.
All right. As you can see, folks, we could go on and on and on. I'm so glad that we were able to talk about, again, one of our favorite eras in Star Trek as a jumping point for all of this imagination. Any final words, Duxbury, before we start doing our gratitude sign off?
Just that, we ended up talking about a lot of stuff that is in the later part of the Star Trek canon, even though the adventures that we've written are in the movie era specifically. But I think the reason that our heads are so naturally going in that direction is all of these themes of how the Klingon Empire transitions from war to peace. All of these stories happen in cycles. They happen in circles. And I think you can definitely take material that is in these adventures or that's in the Klingon War tactical campaign and apply them to another era so well, because those recurring story elements are such a defining feature of what makes Star Trek, really.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is like, get rich with, like, some people are afraid to break canon in their games. No, that's the exact place you want to break canon, and you want to explore new ideas. And believe me, 5 years, 10 years from now, you're going to be mad because you're going to be like, they stole my idea. Because because that's what writers do, is they break it, they make it interesting. And I just love how this game and RPG unleashes the imagination. So let's do gratitude. I'll go to Michael, and then we'll close out with Jim. I'm grateful to the writing community. And I'm talking, when I say writing community, I mean both the people who are paid freelancers or regular writers like a Derek Tyler Attico, or even the people who are posting on continuing missions, all the fans who are putting their stories. Each one of those is a gem of an idea. And believe me, when I read something, I always think like, I'm going to save that over there for later. Oh, that was actually good flavor. So I really love all the ingredients people are throwing in here. As you can see, Duxbury, he's part of RPG groups. I'm part of an RPG group with writers. The stories never end. RPG is so fun. So I want to give my gratitude to all the writers, paid, unpaid, sitting at home by themselves or playing with groups. Just appreciate everyone. Duxbury?
I want to give a shout out to the folks on the Modiphius Discord channel, some of whom have had very kind things to say about alternative truths, which is lovely, but also who helped me with lots of ideas for my June campaign when I needed a lot of galactic high fashion looks, as I apparently now need. So yeah, it's a really great community who've really helped me out and been really kind to the work that we're putting out as well. So appreciate you guys.
Nice.
Yeah, I'll say thank you to all the creatives who've been involved in Star Trek, whether you're a professional or just a fan like us, writing stuff. I think there was so much great material out there, not just for specifically for Klingons, since we're talking about Undiscovered Country and the Klingons today. Especially, I think I got to thank Ron D. Moore for all the world building he did for the Klingons for next gen, building on everything that would happen in the original series. Because I think a lot of what we talked about tonight was all based on that foundation, right? And then moving it forward. So thanks, Ron. If you're even watching this, who knows? But also thank you to all the fans, all the Star Trek Adventures fans out there for the last 8 years who've been playing the game, following the game, adding stuff to the game, talking about the game online, like all your ideas and stories and actual plays and captain's log stories, like all that stuff that's out there. I'm reading as much of it as I can, and like Michael Dismuke said, I'm pulling ideas, because that's what you do as a writer. You always pull ideas from everywhere you can find them, and I'm constantly filling my brain with story, no matter where it's coming from. So don't feel shy about sharing your stuff. Like write up a captain's log story, share it. Write up your group's adventures and share it. Talk about what's happening with your group, because I just love reading all that stuff, because it's inspiring me to do my next thing with my group, and I just appreciate all of you. So thanks so much, as always.
All right, fantastic. So thank you again, Duxbury, for coming on board. We always love having you here. And until next time, IDIC.
Live long and prosper. Be safe. Be well. We'll talk to you all next time.